All right, FinTech homies, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Awesome. So today we're going to be tackling The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Great book.
It is a really, really good book.
Yeah.
And it really digs into just how we as humans think about money.
Yep.
So you guys are FinTech homies, so you're probably pretty familiar with investing and personal finance.
At least a little bit.
Right. But we're going beyond that today.
Yeah.
This isn't about the technical stuff or, what to invest in.
Right, the X's and O's.
Exactly. This is about the why behind our decisions.
That's the interesting part.
It is. And Housel makes this great point right off the bat. Traditional finance focuses so much on the hard skills, all the math and formulas.
The numbers.
Yeah. But those really only tell part of the story.
For sure.
Like, you can crunch all the numbers you want, but if you don't understand the psychology behind your actions...
You're missing something.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can be great at math, but still make terrible financial decisions.
Right.
It's like he argues that those soft skills, understanding human behavior, emotions, biases,
Oh, yeah.
those are actually critical for making sound financial decisions.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, sometimes you do stuff with money, and it's like, why did I do that?
All the time.
Right. I remember back when I was, just out of college, working as a valet.
Oh, wow, valet days.
Yeah. I met this guy, super successful tech millionaire.
Really?
Yeah. He designed this key part of Wi-Fi routers, had successful companies, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, financially, he had it figured out.
Yeah.
But with his money, he would do these things that were just kind of strange.
Like what?
He used to carry around this brick of $100 bills.
A literal brick.
Yeah, wrapped up.
Wow.
And he'd just show it off to people.
That's interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah.
You'd think someone with that much success wouldn't need to do that.
Right, you'd think he'd be more, I don't know, secure.
Exactly. And it's a perfect example of how you can be brilliant, be super successful financially, but still struggle with the psychology of money.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe there should be a class in school on that, Money and Your Emotions 101 or something.
What for taking that class?
Right. So Housel goes on to talk about how our relationship with money is really shaped by our own personal history.
That makes sense.
Yeah, what might seem crazy to one person could totally make sense to someone else.
Based on their background, what they've seen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he gives this example of John F. Kennedy, JFK.
Oh, wow.
Get this. JFK had zero firsthand experience with the Great Depression.
Really?
Yeah, his family was incredibly wealthy.
Oh.
So while everyone else was, struggling, he was living a pretty comfortable life.
So he never really experienced those hard times?
No, not at all.
That's wild.
It is. And it even became a point of contention, during his campaign.
I can see how that would be an issue.
Yeah, people were like, how can you understand what we're going through?
If you've never been there yourself.
Exactly. And it's crazy to think a future president, right, whose decisions affect the entire country's financial well-being.
Yeah.
His whole perspective on this major event, the Great Depression, was shaped by his personal circumstances.
That's fascinating.
Right.
It makes me think about my own experiences.
Yeah.
The things I saw growing up, how my family handled money.
Mm-hmm.
It probably shaped how I view risk, reward, all that.
For sure.
It's what were the big financial events that happened during your formative years?
Oh, wow.
Did you see your family struggle?
Mm.
Or were things pretty stable? Even if you weren't consciously aware of it, those experiences could be playing a role in your financial decisions today.
Whoa, that's pretty deep.
It is, right?
Mm.
But once you understand those influences, you can start making more informed choices.
Makes sense.
It's all about self-awareness, which is honestly one of the biggest takeaways from this book.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Self-awareness is key. And speaking of things that don't always seem logical, Housel dives into this thing that I always find fascinating. People buying lottery tickets.
Oh, yeah.
Especially people who maybe, can't really afford it.
Right. It seems kind of irrational.
It does. But Housel says it actually makes sense when you consider their circumstances, their psychology.
It's like they're telling themselves a story.
Exactly.
A story that justifies that gamble.
Yeah, and that story is influenced by their background, their hopes, their options,
It's like that dream of winning, however unlikely, becomes so powerful that it overshadows any logical thinking.
It's a good reminder that emotions and personal narratives, they often overpower logic and math when it comes to money.
It's true.
And speaking of things that might seem a little crazy, did you know that this whole idea of individual retirement planning, the way we think about it now, is actually a pretty new concept.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, like the 401k, it didn't even exist until 1978.
Wow, that recently.
I know, right?
That's crazy.
And the Roth IRA, that came even later, in the late 90s.
Huh. So we're all kind of figuring this retirement thing out as we go.
It does feel that way sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's like we were suddenly handed this complex financial puzzle.
With no instructions.
Exactly. And we're just trying to figure out where the pieces go.
All right, so we've covered some really interesting ground so far.
Yeah, we have.
I've talked about how personal experiences shape our views on money, how powerful narratives can be.
Definitely.
Let's see what other fascinating insights we can uncover in this deep dive.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's a whole new world when it comes to retirement.
Right. And speaking of new, Housel goes on to talk about the role of luck and risk.
Oh, yeah.
And he uses Bill Gates as an example.
The ultimate success story.
Right. And it's easy to look at him and be like, well, if he could do it, anyone can.
Yeah, the whole self-made billionaire narrative.
Exactly. But Housel breaks it down and shows how insanely unlikely Gates' success story actually was.
Like, what are the chances?
Right. Like, think about it. Go to one of the few schools in the country that actually had computer access at that time.
And that was back in the day when computers were, like, room-sized.
Exactly. And then being in a city near a company that needed his specific skills at that exact moment.
It's like all these stars had to align.
Totally. And Housel even points out the statistics, like how few students went to that specific school, lived in that area, had access to those early computers.
Yeah.
It really highlights how much luck played a role.
It's not to take away from his accomplishments, of course.
Of course not. He was obviously brilliant and driven.
Absolutely.
But it just shows that even with all that talent, luck still played a huge part.
It's a good reminder that we can't control everything.
Totally. And that trying to replicate those extreme outliers, like billionaires,
Yeah.
it's probably not the best strategy for most of us.
Exactly, because those are usually exceptions to the rule.
Right. So I guess learning financial lessons only from like the super successful or the huge failures, that's not really the way to go.
Not really, no.
So what should we be focusing on then?
Housel says we should look at the broader patterns of success and failure.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, because those are more likely to apply to your own situation.
Right. And speaking of realistic approaches, let's talk about this idea of enough.
Enough.
Yeah, like when is enough? Enough. Because Housel argues that one of the biggest psychological hurdles we face with money is that we're constantly moving the goalpost.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Right, like we reach a certain level of success.
Yeah.
And instead of feeling content, we just want more.
More.
Exactly. And he tells this cautionary tale about Rajat Gupta.
What's that?
He was the former CEO of McKinsey.
Oh, wow, McKinsey.
Yeah, super successful, prestigious, powerful.
Yeah, you don't get much higher than that.
Right. But it wasn't enough for him.
What happened?
He ended up going to prison for insider trading.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
Wow, so even with all that success,
It wasn't enough.
it's like that saying, enough is never enough.
Right. And there's this great anecdote in the book
Oh.
about Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller.
The writers.
Yeah. They're talking to this billionaire who's like complaining about how rich people always want more.
Sounds better.
And Vonnegut goes, yeah, well, I have something he'll never have. Enough.
That's great.
Right. It's a good reminder that contentment isn't about how much you have.
It's about being satisfied with what you have.
Exactly. Or enough about enough, pun intended. Let's talk about something a little more exciting, the magic of compounding.
Ah, yes. Compounding, the eighth wonder of the world.
Right. Housel really breaks it down beautifully, showing how small, consistent gains over time
Can create incredible results.
It's amazing. Like even those small contributions I make to my investments now,
Yeah.
they can really add up over time.
Yeah, absolutely can. And he uses Warren Buffett, of course, as the prime example.
Mr. Compounding himself.
Exactly.
Right.
But here's the thing. Most of his wealth was actually accumulated after he turned 50.
Wait, are you serious?
I'm serious. He'd been investing for decades before that, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was that long game, that consistency over time.
That really paid off.
That's what made him a financial titan.
So it wasn't just about being a brilliant investor.
It was about staying in the game for the long haul.
That's pretty inspiring. It means even if you're not some investing genius,
Yeah,
you can still build significant wealth over time.
exactly. But there's a catch.
Uh-oh, what's the catch?
To really benefit from compounding, you got to ride out those market ups and downs.
Oh, yeah, the volatility.
You can't just panic sell when things get tough.
So discipline is key.
Discipline and a solid financial plan.
So you need to have a plan, and stick to it, even when things get crazy.
Exactly. Housel even talks about how Buffett's friend, Rick Guerin,
What happened?
he was actually forced to sell his Berkshire Hathaway stock early
Oh, no, why?
because of margin calls during a market downturn.
That's rough.
And you know what? He ended up missing out on massive gains later on.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to think long term.
So how do we avoid making that kind of mistake?
It goes back to having a solid plan and understanding your own risk tolerance.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because when those market storms inevitably hit, you need to be prepared to weather them.
Without making impulsive decisions.
Exactly.
So having a strategy and sticking to it is crucial.
Absolutely. It's one of the most important things you can do as an investor.
What other key insights should we be taking away from all this?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways for me is that the psychology behind our decisions is just as important as the numbers themselves.
It's not just about crunching the numbers.
No, it's about understanding why we do what we do with money.
Exactly.
And Housel also talks a lot about the importance of saving, which can sometimes be a little less exciting than investing.
Yeah, saving isn't always the most glamorous topic.
Right, but he makes this really interesting comparison to energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency. Okay, I'm intrigued.
He says that reducing your spending can actually have a bigger impact than always chasing those big investment returns.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like if you make your house more energy efficient.
You're using less energy without even having to make any major upgrades.
Exactly. It's the same principle with money.
So it's not just about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep.
Right. Everyone wants those high investment returns.
Of course, who doesn't?
But focusing on saving can be more, controllable.
You can control that more directly.
Exactly. And it's more predictable.
That's a good point.
And Housel actually has this really thought-provoking idea about saving.
Oh.
He says that saving money is often more about controlling your ego than increasing your income.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
It's true, though.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it makes sense.
Because think about it, so much of what we spend money on, it's about keeping up with others, impressing people.
Oh, yeah, totally.
We want that new car, those fancy clothes, that bigger house.
We want what we don't have.
Right. And it's often driven by this need for external validation.
More than an actual need for the thing itself. So maybe the next time I'm about to buy something, I should ask myself, do I really need this?
Yeah. Or am I just trying to keep up with the Joneses?
That's a good question to ask.
And let's not forget about the non-monetary benefits of saving.
What do you mean?
Well, saving gives you freedom.
Freedom to do what?
Freedom to do what you want, when you want. Pursue your passions, maybe even retire early.
Those are some pretty big returns.
They are. And they're hard to put a price tag on.
Definitely. I feel like that's something a lot of people crave these days.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
More autonomy, more flexibility.
Absolutely.
And Housel also talks about something that really resonated with me, the importance of room for error in financial planning.
Room for error. I like that.
Yeah. And he uses this really great analogy about blackjack card counting.
Okay, I'm listening.
So even those professional gamblers, the ones who really know the odds,
Mm-hmm.
they're still going to bet conservatively because they know if they hit a losing streak, it could wipe them out.
They've got to protect themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They build in that buffer.
Yeah, it's like a safety net.
So it's kind of like having an emergency fund.
Yeah. Not getting over-leveraged, diversifying your investments.
All those things that help you weather the storm when things don't go according to plan.
Because let's face it, life is unpredictable.
So true.
Yeah.
And the market is too.
Exactly. You never know what's going to happen.
And he reminds us that, we're not spreadsheets.
We're humans.
We are. And our emotions can sometimes get in the way of making those perfectly rational financial decisions.
Oh, yeah. Emotions can definitely cloud our judgment.
They can. And there's this great example in the book
Oh,
about this doctor who won a Nobel Prize
wow.
for figuring out that fevers are actually beneficial, like they help you fight infection.
That makes sense.
I know, right? But even knowing this, even with the scientific evidence,
Yeah,
people still panic and try to lower fevers at the first sign of discomfort.
because they feel bad.
Exactly. Even though it's actually helping them get better.
It's funny how our emotions can make us act against our own best interests.
It's true.
And it's the same with money. We often make decisions based on how they make us feel in the moment.
Rather than what's actually best for us in the long run.
Exactly.
So what's the solution? How do we balance logic and emotion?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
Housel's advice is to aim for reasonable financial decisions.
Go.
The kind you can actually stick with, even when things get emotional.
So it's not always about finding that mathematically perfect strategy.
No, it's more about finding a strategy that works for you, that you can actually follow.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's about finding that balance between being smart with your money and not driving yourself crazy with complicated strategies.
Exactly.
And he also introduces this idea that, investment returns always come with a price. Volatility and uncertainty.
I guess that's just the nature of the game.
It is. You can't expect high returns without taking on some risk.
No risk, no reward, right?
Right. And he makes this analogy to Disneyland.
Disneyland. Okay, I'm curious.
He says you pay for that experience, that fun day at the park.
Yeah.
But there's going to be lines, crowds, maybe even a ride breakdown.
That's true.
It's all part of the experience.
So you're saying we should see market volatility as kind of like the price of admission to the wealth building game.
Exactly. It's a fee, not a fine.
Like that.
And if you're constantly trying to avoid that fee by timing the market or jumping in and out of investments, you're likely to miss out on the long-term gains.
It's like trying to sneak into Disneyland. You might get away with it once or twice, but eventually
you're going to get caught.
And probably end up worse off.
Exactly. And Housel wraps things up by cautioning against following financial advice from people who have different goals and timelines than you.
Oh, that's a really important point.
It is. Like, what might be a rational investment for someone in their 20s might be a terrible idea for someone nearing retirement.
That makes total sense.
You've got to have a financial plan that aligns with your individual circumstances.
Can't just blindly follow the crowd.
Exactly. And he also touches on the power of narratives and how they shape economic behavior.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating concept.
It is. He uses the 2008 financial crisis as an example.
What's interesting about that is that the underlying economic fundamentals weren't actually that different in 2008 compared to the previous year.
No, they weren't.
But the story surrounding the economy, the whole narrative, that changed dramatically.
It did, like the stability of housing prices, the trustworthiness of banks.
People's perceptions shifted.
And that shift triggered a chain reaction. People lost trust in the system, stopped lending money, and boom, the economy spiraled downward.
It's amazing how powerful those narratives can be.
It really shows how our beliefs and perceptions, even if they're not completely grounded in reality,
can have a huge impact on the economy.
They can, and it highlights the importance of being aware of the narratives that are shaping your own financial decisions.
So we've got to be mindful of those stories we're telling ourselves.
Exactly, because they can influence how you invest, spend, save, and even how you feel about your financial future.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the psychology of money.
It really has.
I highly recommend checking out the book if you want to explore any of these ideas further.
It's a great read.
But what would you say are the most important takeaways from all this?
Well, first of all, remember that your relationship with money is unique to you. It's shaped by your own experiences and biases, so be aware of those and how they might be influencing you.
Great point.
Second, don't get caught up comparing yourself to those financial outliers like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett.
Easier said than done.
I know, but focus on those broader patterns of success and failure, the things that apply to the majority of people.
That's more realistic and achievable.
Exactly. And don't forget about the power of compounding. Start investing early and consistently, even with small amounts.
Little by little, it adds up.
It does. And don't underestimate the power of saving. It's not just about being frugal. It's about building that financial buffer that gives you freedom and options.
And it's about having that room for error.
Yes.
Yes. Because things don't always go according to plan. That's for sure.
And finally, be kind to your future self. Make financial decisions that align with your long-term goals and values.
I love that. Be kind to your future self.
Because the choices you make today will have a ripple effect on your future.
Very true.
So think about what kind of future you want to create and start making choices that support that vision.
Well said. This has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And FinTech Homies, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of money. Remember, financial success isn't just about the numbers. It's about understanding yourself, your behaviors, and your relationship with money.
It's about making choices that align with your values and your goals.
Exactly. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those financial fires burning.